All right, so now on to our speaker, but to start, I'm going to introduce you to Maria Guilfoyle. Maria is an investor at Madrona who is closely involved with Runway and works with Cris as part of Madrona's recent investment in the company. So welcome, Maria.
Hey everyone, my name's Maria. I'm super excited to be introducing to you Cristobal Valenzuela, also known as Cris, the CEO and co-founder of Runway. Cris was born in Chile and moved to New York City to study and research at New York University. Prior to living in New York City, he worked as an engineer and taught in Santiago, Chile. At New York University, Cris spent time researching the intersections of AI/ML, foundation models, and content creation, which led him to co-founding Runway. At Runway, he's on a mission to make content creation accessible to all through advancements in multimodal AI systems to enable new types of creative tools. Something that's unique about Runway is that the Runway team originally developed the core model behind Stable Diffusion and continues to make deep contributions to the science of multimodal and generative models to unblock faster feature development for its own content creators. Over the past 4 years, Cris and the entire team at Runway have built a compelling brand and launched numerous AI tools that are used by companies including CBS, Fox, Google, Pentagram, New Balance, and many more. At Madrona, we're super honored to be able to have invested in Runway's recent Series C, and we're excited to be along the journey with Cris and the entire team. I'll let Cris take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria, for the intro, and Mike for having me here. I'm happy to be here, sharing a bit more about the story of Runway and what we built so far, and most importantly, the learnings that we've accumulated over the last 4 years. I was thinking about what's the best way of telling the story, and there's a lot of different avenues or directions and angles I can take. We can go into the very technical side of things, or we can go into the more inspirational side of things. I think one particularly interesting perspective that I thought could be interesting would be to focus around how two things what we've learned over time around building Runway, and also our philosophy or our product philosophy and our product vision, and in terms of what it means and why is it important to build creative tools and kind of generative AI systems and this type of interfaces and products. And so hopefully this is useful for you guys. I know you're all very technical here, so you're building a lot of interesting things. I'm eager to see kind of like what comes out, but also would love to make it as interactive as possible. So I know we have some like the first part of the presentation for like just telling more about Runway, but then Q&A and questions. I would love to go deeper into a bit more questions if that makes sense. I'll share my screen and we can get started, unless there's something else, Mike. No, before we start? Good, perfect. Cool, you can all see my screen now? Cool. So I'll walk you a little bit through, again, the story, kind of the origins of Runway, but with the sense of giving you our philosophy of how we think about building products and why is it important to build products at the intersection of creativity and AI. So as Maria mentioned, I started Runway 4 years ago with my 2 co-founders after working at school and researching on creativity tools for a couple of years. And we've been working on this problem now with a team of researchers and scientists and engineers, really understanding or trying to tackle interfaces, research, and infrastructure to build what we consider the next generation of video editing tools, of image editing tools, and creative tools. I'm from Chile. I spent the last part of the last decade working at the intersection of computational creativity. So I've learned a lot about building software, but also human intentions and the role of software in really finding and solving solutions for humans, which I think is the ultimate role of every piece of technology that we build. And the origins of Runway actually rooted in this particular image. This is the image that for me kickstarted my interest in the space. Some of you might recognize this. If you don't, this is Deep Dream. It's an algorithm that Google released in 2015, 2016. It was actually, I think it was leaked in Reddit at the time. And what I found really fascinating about this was, first of all, the way it was built, the complexities and the the learnings that were coming out of building neural networks around the time AlexNet and ImageNet were coming around. This was probably like 2016, 2015. But most importantly for me as an artist and as an engineer, was really fascinating was the aesthetic component of it. This is just radically new. It's different. It's something in my brain just broke, right? And I think that curiosity aspect has really driven my career, but it has also driven the way we think about the product of Runway, which is curiosity-driven development. Think about technology and think about building solutions and exploring avenues with a curiosity mindset. And you'll be able to learn a lot about things that you perhaps don't even know. And now, since then, since I first saw this image to now, we've come a long way. We built impressive and significant systems and models for generating images in way more controllable ways. We've made progress for making video more expressible. And most importantly, I would say, ultimately, again, these tools are storytelling tools. And so we've ultimately helped serve customers and users in telling really compelling stories with this technology. And so the origins of how we come to be now working on this start with this. This is an image of Paul Cézanne, a painting that he used, a mountain and a landscape that he used to paint a few times in his life. And when I was researching about tool making and art making and the role of tools in that process, one story stood out for me that I think influences a lot of how we think about the ultimate role of tools in aiding us to express ourselves. And if for some of you that are not familiar, this is what pigments used to look like 200 years ago. These are the primary tools people have to tell stories, to express themselves in paintings, right? Now, the thing is that creating these tools was a very complex, sophisticated process. It involved years of training. It was an obscure process that required deep understanding of the mechanisms of pigments and the uniqueness of how to combine color to create some sort of like substance that would allow you to then look at the world and paint something, right? And for a long time, painting was very hard to do, and it was very inaccessible, and it was very restricted to only the handful of people who had the money, the resources, and the time to learn how to do that and to pay for that. But then again, technology developed, inventions were pioneered, in particularly one, this paint tubes. And I always go back to this analogy because I think paint tubes marked a significant change in storytelling at large, and most importantly in art, but also in society at large. It was a very like underseen or underestimated like impact. And what paint tubes allowed artists to do was basically to take their ideas outside of studios, right? People were able to take canvases and paint in plein air, which basically means just outside, right? And you were able to see the world in completely different ways, right? It opens yourself to new ways of reflecting on what you're seeing and expressing that. And so there was a new wave of art made, right? This was now possible because paint tubes were accessible, and so Paul Cézanne can go outside and like paint this, right? And I think for me, what we're seeing right now in AI is perhaps this manifestation, right? We are transitioning from big brothers, we're transitioning from this way of interacting with computers to this, right? Which is a tool. It's important that we keep this in mind. This is a tool, right? These are systems that are going to help us see the world in a completely different way. And it's up to us to imagine what those ways and those systems and those interactions will be like, right? And I think we're still extremely early to really understand the impact of it. It's going to be massive. It's going to be huge. And I think part of what you all are doing here is exactly going outside and painting in plein air and experimenting with these paint tubes and combining them and mixing colors and trying different brush strokes. But most importantly, I would say, and the philosophy of how we think about the product of Runway is that you need to experiment a lot and you need to try a lot of things and you need to really learn as much as you can on how these tools will help you do something in particular. And for us that we're building on the creative side of things, that we're taking these paint tubes and actually putting them in the hands of artists and filmmakers and designers and creators at large, for us is really thinking about this, right? We've come and used software in a particular way, and we've constrained ourselves to think that software should work in one particular way. There's an interaction that's become recurrent. And the thing is that it doesn't have to be like that in the future, right? It doesn't necessarily have to have that same level of constraint and understanding of software now that you have a radical innovation, now that we have a pigment and a paint tube that we can go outside and use, right? And so product philosophy for us has been driven mostly with this idea in mind. Again, curiosity-driven development and understanding these are tools. These are tools that will help you achieve a common goal, a specific goal, focus always on that goal and focus on delivering the most effective way of making that goal come true. And when you think about what are those new possibilities, you probably all are experimenting with language models and text models and generative models in some way or the other. I think interfaces for natural language interaction in any domain are going to be radically important. I think prompt engineering will be less important perhaps because other systems, more controllable systems will be in place. But there's still a lot to be uncovered here. Again, there's still a lot to just go outside and mixture and paint with these systems to understand the limits of what's gonna be feasible. And for sure you've seen this. This is I guess the progress that we've seen so far in the space, which for me is the most exciting aspect of understanding where we're heading, is really looking at rate of progress rather than specific moments in time. When we started Runway, that's the image that you can generate with the prompt on the left, right? On the right, that's the image you can generate today with latent diffusion or stable diffusion, which is the model we've published a few years ago. The models and the outputs and the quality of the models that you'll see coming up in the next couple of years is just only gonna explode. And so also for us, something really important when you think about product building and solving someone's need, is really understanding the rate of progress, right? If you focus too much on what is currently possible in one specific moment in time, you might over-optimize or sub-optimize for the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? So think about deploying the system on the left and improving that system versus understanding the radical improvements that the image on the right and the system on the right will have, right? And that's just the nature of building the space, always being very open-minded, understanding that, again, those, in the metaphors, the paint tubes, those paint tubes are being changed all the time, and new pigments are coming up all the time, and new pigments and new pencils and new brushes are also coming up all the time. Experiment with those as much as you can to really, again, drive them in unexpected ways, in new ways. For us, the way we've come of like put a first circle in our work of understanding interface design, software design, and how to build those new types of paintbrushes and paint tubes has been around research, right? Really focusing on understanding what it means, what kind of pigments do artists need, right? What kind of pigments do creatives have to really tell the stories that they need to tell. And so we're very proud of kind of like pioneering some new techniques in this space, and there's a lot yet to be built. I think a specific area of interest, if you're building a space today, and that we've always tried to keep in mind, is this idea of multimodalities and systems that can understand different domains and translate between them, and you can work in very cohesive ways with them. And if you're building in the generative AI space, one thing I would definitely keep in mind is think about the content that you'll consume and how that content will be made. Try not to think about the previous ways of folks creating content in traditional ways, because those ways will radically change. The moment you start consuming content online that's going to be generated, new types of systems and tools will be needed. And so a few things I'll try to keep in mind when thinking about this is this, and hopefully you're all building stuff because you know this is going to happen. The penetration of the tools that you guys are building and the world building space are going to be really important for not just creatives, but companies at large and solutions at large. And so there's opportunities for business intelligence, for accounting, for legal, for copywriting, for software engineers to really understood from first principles or understand those paint tubes again from first principles, and try them out and experiment with them. I think we're still at the phase of experimentation. One thing I've learned around the building of Runway has been really understanding customers as much as you can. I know most of our early customers by name. I know where they work. I know their frustrations. I know what they do. I've chatted with them. They come to visit us at the office. And by really building in conjunction with them, really building closely with them, you get to see things that you won't get to see anywhere else, right? And so one thing I would definitely strongly recommend is never build in isolation, never build with too many assumptions in mind. It's always good to just ship really fast and learn as much as possible, right? Go outside, take your paint tube, paint as much as you can, go back, get feedback on your painting as fast as you can, really as fast as you can. Try as many different avenues as you can. And you will see that there are a lot of things that you're not even aware of that will help you really understand from customers how to best approach them. And so just want to end perhaps with that note on the journey of Runway, and I want it to be like as broad as possible so we can tackle questions in specific ways as you guys want to take it. We always think of Runway as a paint tube. It's a tool, it's a brush that will help you achieve something. And that paintbrush and those paint tubes really need to be experimented and tested. For me, that's the only way you're going to learn. I'm sure you all read books about startup building and company building and iterations and being lean. But most importantly, I would say for this specific type of technology, for the moment of where we are right now, the most important thing is just go outside and build. Just build as many things as you can, and then test those things as many times as you can. And you learn way more by doing that than by staying inside and painting on your studio alone. And so that's hopefully a big kind of like picture of the journey of Runway. Hopefully that gives you a sense of why we're building it. I know it's more of like philosophy of the importance of the space and our journey, and perhaps the metaphor we keep using internally to understand product. But I'm also happy to go into any specifics if you guys want to know more anything about the funding story, the journey itself, the products, the evolutions we have, and the research components as well. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to, I think there are some few questions coming up in the chat. Yep, Mike, I don't know if you want to read those or.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. So one question that came through is, what are the lessons learned from early product iterations that led you to the level of accuracy and quality you have today?
Early iterations on products, I think just listening to customers and removing the preconceptions of what you think customers will need. I think as you're building new things, you might come with a lot of ideas around how to serve a customer. We work, for example, with a lot of media companies and film studios and post-production companies. And I've edited videos before, but like my assumption of how film production works is very limited to someone who's working in the industry for 20 years, right? So iterations on products early on for us were really important to have as much and as many input forms from our customers as possible. And the way you can get those inputs from customers is it's diverse. It really depends on kind of like where you are. For us, what really works is just reaching out within our networks, right? We're coming from a creative background, so just reach out to anyone you know, just like you're going to send 1,000 emails, you're going to get 10 replies. Those 10 replies are they're going to be worth a lot. I think every time we try to assume too many things about how people will use the technology or a product or an idea, we make mistakes. We've learned from those mistakes. And every time we incorporate folks and teams and people as early as possible, you get much better results. And as an engineer, it's really easy to get trapped into this idea that like you just need to build more and build more and build more, and like, oh, if you just do this and you just do this and like you keep doing that and you keep delaying the release of whatever you're building, just don't. Just test it out as much and as fast as you can. From a purely product perspective, research is a bit different because research takes a little bit of time to really condense into like solutions. But from product building, like really being out and really learning as much as possible from like real world case scenarios is going to allow you to learn way more. I think that for us is gotten has been really important. And it's also allowed us to really understand and improve the level of accuracy on those models, because you really understand what kind of things do people want when they're thinking about using the models in the first place. So yeah, just customers, working with them as much as you can and as close as you can.
As it relates to the underlying foundation models, what are some of the limitations you think you'll just need to learn to live with in the product versus others where you think that there'll be technology advances that helps overcome those limitations in the future?
I think there's a lot yet to be like uncovered about controlling the models, and like I think prompt engineering, for example, is like just a hackable way we've collectively found to like understand how to use the models in like expressive ways. It's not going to be the one that we'll be using forever, and so models have right now limited like results in some domains, but if you just look again at the rate of progress, those constraints will be solved over time. It's like the pigments are like getting built, and we'll eventually have like a very robust system of like buying those pigments. I think there's a lot of limitations, but it's still very early to define and see what things will forever be there versus when things will be fixed over time.
Here's a very, I think, relevant for the audience question from Grant. How did you go from idea to business? So like the thinking here is like from initial inspiration in the research to, you know, a product in customers' hands, that first prototype that people were using. What was that journey like for you?
It was, to be honest, a very unexpected journey. I came to build Runway because these were tools that I personally wanted to use, and I think being driven by passion really matters when you're building a company, because you're going to be doing this for a long time, and you need to really be eager to wake up every morning and spend 20 hours, like 24 hours working on this really hard. And so it wasn't like, oh, I want to build a business and I want to build a startup. For me, it was like, I want to really build what I think is meaningful and valuable for the market and the industry and the type of people that I work with every day. And the most effective way of delivering that mission is building a company, right? I quickly realized that after research, that if I really wanted to execute on the mission, my mission was not, or my goal or my assumption or my curiosity was not to toy with technology just for the sake of like experimenting. It was like, you need to experiment, but you need to have a goal. And that goal is going to be better served if you start a business, because the business is a very sustainable way of doing that over time, right? It took me, so overall time, it took me like, I would say from early research to the first demo of Runway, probably like 2 months. And that version is completely radically different from what you could see today. It's a thin layer on top of like Docker that was basically allowing you to install models and run them locally, remotely via a system and a set of APIs. But that was the thin layer, right? And that thin layer was the first product I put out. I just tweeted about it and I got 1,000 first users that were interested about it. I learned a lot and they keep iterating a lot about it. So first idea to prototype, probably like 2 months, but in a startup, everything is a prototype. So you're always learning as you go. And that's what we keep doing over the last 4 years.
That's really interesting. It relates to Radek's question, kind of building on this. So, you know, you really went and got the product out there and iterated, but in terms of, you know, these questions around accuracy and quality, when you start making, and we looked at some of your customers, you know, these are enterprise customers. I imagine in some cases, the bar is very high for the quality of the results. How did you balance that trade-off of early prototype and iteration and enterprise customers who have high expectations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, again, I'll go back to understanding and working with your customers as close and often as you can. For example, for something like green screen, which is our AI tool for rotoscoping in research, is called video object segmentation. You could build a lot of assumptions about the quality and the type of content that customers want. But if you really listen to them, you'll understand much better. That's very different from what your assumptions might kind of like consider. And for us, the first version of that prototype, and now it's a tool that runs at 60 frames per second and 4K, and it rotoscopes and creates backgrounds in like a few seconds for minutes of video, right? The first prototype of that was running at 6 frames per second, right? And it was relatively like badish, right? But it was significantly better than anything else those customers were already using, right? And so by providing them with an understanding of where we could improve, we learn a lot about how to improve it, right? And we understood that an enterprise customer, if you help them really solve a pain in their business in a radically new way, even if it takes time, but you're really committed to like understanding the core component of it, we're willing to give you on feedback and iterate and work with you on making that happen. And so we've seen this consistently over like products. The quality component matters a lot, but it really matters depending on who you're serving and what you're serving, right? I think rotoscoping as an automatic solution is never something studios will want. They want to have a human component in it. So that's also something you need to consider, for example, on how you build the interfaces, how you train the models, and how the accuracy of the models works. So you have all of these like factors. And so I'll go back to the same thing. It's like, if you want to iterate on those business enterprise customers, just go and work with them as fast and as close as you can.
Varun has a really good question on people's minds. It feels like a pretty linear, you had an idea, you put it in the market, you got it in front of customers, and you kind of kept to this core, premise that you had all along. Varun's asking the questions, about how did you get to product market fit, and did you have to pivot a bunch of times to get there?
Yeah, there's a book we gave everyone early on Runway. It's a researcher from, I think he was at OpenAI and now at Uber, I think. Ken Stanley. The book is called Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned. And the assumption is that if you want to make great things, just start by putting stepping stones, and understanding that every stepping stone will lead you to a new finding, a new understanding, and a new learning. And if you have an overall goal, don't plan too much ahead of it. Don't plan like 3-4 years ahead of it, because you're gonna close yourself to a lot of things that you're not just seeing, right? And so for us, I think product market fit is a spectrum. You have either weak, strong, you have no product market fit, or like very strong product market fit. If you want to get to strong product market fit, put every stepping stone one at a time and learn as fast as you can, right? Just put it, learn new directions and new avenues, do it again, and then collectively go at that, and you'll achieve great things. With the product you guys have seen, and the product you probably have seen through demos or experiences, the work we've done with latent diffusion and the work we've done in diffusion models in general, those are after 1,000 iterations, right? You're seeing like the results of like months and works and iterations and things that were just threw to the garbage, right? Because it didn't work. And so I think that's always a mistake of like narratives around startups, where like people see, oh, it's just so linearly like obvious. The fact is not. You have like all of these learnings at every single stage, but just you just move on, you just leave them behind and you do the next thing, right? And so that kind of like paths are more chaotic than they actually feel like from the outside. But it's also part of running a startup. It's a very ambiguous and chaotic environment. You're learning a lot, right? And so you need to really be comfortable with that, right? And I think we personally drive a lot with that, because we're very eager to continuously be learning. So yeah. One step at a time, one stepping stone at a time. I definitely recommend that book if you want to go deeper into that philosophy.
It's a great recommendation. As we think about founding teams, so a lot of these builders at this event, it's a couple of founders, and as they advance, they'll be thinking of bringing other people on. Is there something unique about the kind of team it takes to be successful in building on foundation models? I think about your background in research, and you bring a very deep, unique set of skills and experiences to the table to take advantage of this moment. Is there any recommendations you'd make for, these teams, and if they think about rounding out the rest of their founding team to compete?
Yeah, find people you like working with. Find people you're gonna wake up every day and like be very happy to work with. Find people that are eager to learn, that are very humble. Again, building a company is a lot about learning a lot. And so humbleness, I think, really matters, because you're opening yourself to more ideas and more things. But most importantly, just like, again, work with someone you really like working with. I think the best way of doing that is, if you haven't found a founder, if you want to understand who to work with, just create a toy project and work for 2 weeks. Probably in the first 2 days, you'll know if you see yourself working with this person forever. Because it's a long-term bet. I mean, that's why I want to work with my 2 co-founders. I couldn't imagine not working with them, and like the next 10 years, 20 years. I was just so fascinated by what we're doing together at school that it was kind of like an obvious thing to do. And so, yeah, I think being very comfortable and like having the ability to work together is perhaps the most important factor.
That's great. A question from Thomas. I'm going to broaden it a little bit. When building on top of foundation models, there's seems to be this inherent risk that model can change, and so what you're building on top can also change, and also the the unit economics of delivering a product that requires building on top of these models. Thomas's specific question is, how can early stage startups keep foundation model costs low? So we can bring that into that broader question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Be very pragmatic and be very like first principles driven. Like, don't over obsess about an API or a model in particular. Remember that picture from 2018 to 2022 about the two types of qualities of images? Like, if you over optimize and build too many assumptions on one particular model, that model will become like obsolete in a couple of months at this rate of the amount of progress that's been happening in the space. But if you have more solid foundations on the way you're going to solve a problem, and it happens to be the case that in one particular time you have an API or a model that you could leverage, or that's open source, or it's already an API that you can just work and pay for, then do it. Don't overthink it, and don't scale prematurely about like all the things that you'll need to have. Just focus about the core value prop that you're giving your customers. Like, what's the thing that they really want? Great, just focus on that. What's the cheapest, easiest, most effective way of testing that? And then if you succeed at that, great, let's get 10 customers first, 1,000 customers. And then when you get to a point of like, well, it's getting expensive, well, that's another problem, but you got 1,000 customers first. So again, stepping stones, I think, still matters a lot.
Fantastic. Well, I want to respect your time. This has been incredible. Like, any additional advice you'd give from this founding group as they kind of embark on this journey? You're out in front, you're innovating, kind of in front of a whole wave coming here around, I think, innovation, new middleware, app layer, innovations. Any advice to this group?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're doing the right thing. I think this is the thing that everyone should be doing, just building. I think this is the time to be building because there's so much potential. Again, I'll go back to the analogy of pigments. Like, we've created these paint tubes, and now paint tubes are waiting for people to come and grab them and just paint outside in the world and come up with ways of representing the world and create new expression forms and like new solutions and new tools, and just grab them and go outside and try new things. And don't really be afraid of, I would say, seeing things from other angles or perspectives. These models are very powerful to really leapfrog industries at large. There's a lot of innovation that are going to be untapped by folks who take the models in unexpected directions. And so just be creative about that. I think that's the one thing we try to embed in the way we build product, the way we build and learn from customers, and the way we build research. Creativity really matters now, but creativity in the sense of how you're going to like use these models and deploy them and play with them and connect them with different things. And so, yeah, I think you guys are doing the right thing. Keep building and keep just learning as much as you can by being really close to the people you're building for.
Outstanding, Cris. Thank you so much. I mean, the work you're doing with Runway is an inspiration to all of us.